Okay, what's up? We're back and we're doing inventory system part 2. So last time we got our items set up and we can grab them and have them despawn. So we're going to work on some widgets today and get them out of the way and set up a couple of the things that we're going to need. So I'm going to jump into the inventory folder. And inside here, I'm going to right click and we're going to make a new blueprint class. And this is going to be the actor component. So I'm going to name this AC underscore inventory. That's going to be what we're going to build everything in. And then I'm also going to add a interface. So I'm going to go to blueprint interface, and I'm just going to name that BPI inventory. And then we're going to need a structure for our items. So I'm going to go into blueprint structure, and I'm just going to call that item struct. Okay, so I'm going to set the structure up first here. So we're going to jump into that. So the first value in here, we're going to name our BP base item, and we're going to make that of the type BP base item. And we're going to make sure that we pick class reference on that. And then I'm going to add variable and we're going to give it a quantity. And we're going to make that a integer. We're going to add another variable and we're going to make this the index. And we're going to leave that as an integer. And then the last one we're going to do, we're going to call inventory. And since I am setting this up with storage units, the storage is going to have to know what inventory it is. So I'm going to give this a type of AC inventory, and we'll do object reference for that. So our structure should be set up. So next I'm going to open up the interface for the inventory, and in there I'm just going to start by making two functions. So we're going to make one called add to inventory, and I'm going to add an input on this, which is going to be our item struct that we made. So I'm going to call this item and then look for the item struct. And then the next function is going to be open inventory. And I'm going to make an input on that saying open. And we're going to make that a Boolean. And I'm going to make one more too, and I'm going to call that storage. And that's going to be a Boolean as well. So with those two functions, we're set to start here. So I'm going to close the interface now. I'm going to make a new folder in here and just call this widgets. So we're going to add a few widgets in here. So I'm going to go to user interface, widget blueprint, user widget, and this is going to be my WBP main HUD. I'm going to call this one. And then I'm just going to duplicate that and call this one inventory window. And then we'll duplicate that one, and we're going to call this one our inventory slot. So the way I'm going to set this up is I'm going to have the inventory create our main HUD for us. So if there's anything else that I'm going to add to the main HUD, I'm going to add it through the inventory. So I'm going to go into that main HUD, and all we're going to do in here is throw a canvas panel down. And I am going to use this to put a dot in the center of the screen too. So I'm going to come up here and look for an image, and I'm going to throw an image onto the canvas panel, and I'll just call that my center dot. And then with that selected, I'm going to go to anchors, and then if I do control and shift and click that center point, it's going to snap it to the center for me. And then I'm going to go into the size, and I'm going to change the size to 15 by 15. And that's just going to give me a little square in the middle. And then what I'm going to do is open up brush, go to draw as, and change that from image to rounded box. And then I get a little circle there. And then we can change this to whatever color we want. I think I'm just going to make mine green. And I'm going to take the opacity down a bit. So I'm going to do 0.5 on my opacity. So then now in the center of this HUD, we'll have our little dot to see what our line trace is hitting. This will make it easier to tell what we're looking at when we go to pick items up. And then I'm going to jump into the graph part of this widget. And we're not going to do anything in the event graph, so I'm just going to delete that stuff. But we are going to override a function in here. So I'm going to override on key down. And then we're going to drag that out to get some room. I'm going to drag off of key event. and we're gonna get key. So when the widget is open, when the inventory is open, our inventory window is gonna have focus. And we're gonna be in UI mode, which means we're not gonna be able to hit the tab key or whatever our inventory key is gonna be to open it. It's not gonna recognize it when we go to close it. So I'm gonna override that on this main HUD here. So I'm gonna drag off and do an equals. And then for me, I'm gonna pick my tab key is gonna open my inventory window. So I'm just gonna go in here and select tab. And then I also want, just because I always hit it, I'm gonna copy and duplicate that. I'm gonna do my escape key too, because a lot of the time when I'm in my inventory, sometimes I hit escape to get out. So I'm gonna add escape on there too. So I'm going to put a branch in here, and then I'm going to come off that and I'm going to do an or Boolean. So if either one of these get pressed, it's going to take me out of the inventory. And then I'm going to do get player character in here. And I'm going to drag off this, and we're going to look for the open inventory interface we made. So if I type in open inventory, you'll see it comes up. It says message. Message is the one we want. So I'm going to throw that in here. So if we hit our tab key or escape key, it's going to send this interface to the player. And we don't want to check these. We want to make sure both of those are unchecked. So if we call open inventory with that checked, that's going to open it. If we call open inventory with that not checked, that's going to close it. And then I'm going to take the false branch from here too. And we're just going to bypass this call and just return out. And then since this is an override, we're going to drag out and just do handled. And we should be all set in here now. This is a precaution just in case we end up clicking. If our inventory is open and we end up clicking off of the inventory window and onto the background, that would give our background focus. And I also want to, while we're in here, just go to class defaults and we want to select focusable. So I'm going to compile, save that, and I'm going to open up the inventory window now. So I'm just going to use some of the sizes that I know worked for me when I did this in testing here. So I'm going to add a size box, and then I'm going to click on that size box, and up here I'm going to override the width and height, and I'm going to do a width of 561 and a height of 586. And then I'm going to change from fill screen to desired on screen. So that's going to be my inventory window here. And then inside this size box, I'm going to put a border. And I'm just going to select the border. I'm going to go to the brush color and just make that black with an alpha of 0.5. And then I'll just make it dark with a little see-through background on it. And then next I'm going to grab a vertical box and throw that into the border. And the vertical box we just want to make sure is stretched to fit. And I'm just going to give it a padding of 2 going around. And then inside that vertical box, we're going to use text. So I'm just going to grab regular text, throw that in the vertical box, select the text, and then I'm just going to do center and center alignment here. And I'll come in here and change some of the properties for that after, but I'm going to look for a scroll box. And then we're going to drop this in the vertical box. Select the scroll box, and I want to do fill. So you can see the scroll box is going to take up the majority of this. Our text is just on the top. And then while we're here, we're just going to look for wrap box. And this is going to be what we're going to create our inventory slot in. So I'm going to drop the wrap box on the scroll box. So then the scroll box is only going to be available if our inventory size or the capacity goes over whatever size we can fit in here. So you can kind of choose to use the scroll box or not. It's just nice having it already built in here, because if you do decide to make storage and you want that to be a lot bigger than your inventory, it's all set up in here. So now that we got that box in, I'm going to go to the text, and now we can just kind of adjust our text and make that whatever size we want. I'm going to maybe take mine off of bold. I'll just leave it the regular font, and I'm just going to leave mine white. And I'm going to say inventory at the top here. So I'm just going to do something like this. You can do whatever you want. If you change sizes or anything, you're going to have to just play around with the size of this, but I'll show you once we get our slot made how you can adjust the size of this to fit the slots easy. But for now, I'm just going to do something like this. And again, this is just something from test, but I'm going to come into the wrap box and I'm going to give it 15 left padding. And this is going to be because it's going to give us a little gap on the right side for the scroll bar. Even though it's not going to show it if we don't use it, we're still going to have that little gap there. So putting 15 on this side will just even it out. So our wrap box will be centered in here, and then if we do use the scroll bar, we'll have an even space with the scroll bar out or not. And the wrap box we're going to set to fill too. And we should be good in the designer here. So I'm going to compile, save, and then we're going to go into the graph in here. And again, we're going to do the same thing that we did on our HUD. So we're going to delete this. We're not going to need anything in the event graph. So we're going to override the on key down on here. This is going to be the HUD that we're going to have focus on. So this is going to be the primary focus. So this one is usually going to take us out. But what I'm going to do is just go back to the main HUD that we did, and we can just copy all this. Just going to copy that and paste it in here. So if we do end up clicking outside of our window, we'll be able to get out of it. And if we're on our inventory window or a slot, we can get out of it. This should work for us here. So I think we're done with our inventory window. So we can actually jump back to our main HUD now. So just compile and save that. So we have our inventory window set. So I'm going to jump back to the main HUD, go to designer. And then if I open up user created, you can see that we have our inventory window. So now I can drag that on the canvas panel, select the inventory window, and we're going to do size to content. So now we can drag this wherever we want to. I'm just going to put mine like over here. You can place it wherever you want, but I'm going to put inventory here, storage here. These can be moved at any time, so it doesn't really matter here. And then I'm going to change this to collapsed, because we're not going to want to see this unless we call our open inventory. So we're going to compile and save that, and then I'm going to jump into the folder that we made again for our inventory. And I'm going to open up the inventory slot now. All right, so we're going to design up this inventory slot. So again, I'm going to use some sizes that I did in testing and I know worked. And then you can always come back through and change it and make it however you want. But I'm going to add a size box in first. And then I'm going to override width and height again. And the width I'm going to make 105. And the height I'm going to make 122. And I'm going to do desired on screen. So this is going to be my inventory slot here. Now inside the size box, I'm going to do a vertical box. And we just want to make sure that that's going to be stretched to fill. And this might get a little confusing, but I'm going to try and keep it simple. So I'm going to look for an overlay here. And I'm going to drag the overlay into the vertical box. And I'm also going to grab text. So I'm going to try and do this as simple as I can here. So we're going to drag the text into the vertical box too. So now the overlay, I'm going to click on overlay and I want to do fill because I want that to take up the majority of this box. And then I'm going to click on the text and I'm going to just set its size to 16. And I want to take it off of bold. And the text, I want to do an alignment of center. And then you can set whatever color you want. I'm just going to leave mine to white. This is all stuff that we can adjust after. So I'm just going to try and get the functionality here working. So you can spend as much time on the widgets as you want. So our overlay is going to take up the rest of this box here. So that's how we want to have it set up. So this is going to be our thumbnail, and then we'll have our item description down here. So inside the vertical box, we just have these two items. But then inside of our overlay, we're going to want to put a button. So I'm going to look for a button, drag that into the overlay. And I'm just going to add the things that we're going to add, and then we can go through and kind of set them up. So I'm going to look for text, and we're going to throw that inside of this overlay here. So inside that overlay, it should have a button and it should have text. And this text is going to be our quantity. So we can actually name this quantity, and we can actually name this like item name. So our text quantity, we can take that way down. I'm going to give that 16 as well. And then I'm just going to we'll just put like a number in here. And I'm going to give that an alignment of the right. And what works good for me is if I give it a little bit of top padding. So I'm going to do 5 top padding, 5 right padding. So I'm going to do something like that, which just kicks it down and out from the corner a little bit. And if we go up to the button here, we want to stretch that. So we're going to stretch that horizontally and vertically. And then you can set your button up however you want to set it up. What I usually like doing is just under pressed. I just take the alpha all the way down because I don't want to see anything under pressed. And then under normal, I take the alpha all the way down. And then for hovered, I'll just give it something. We can come in here and change this, but I'm just going to give it something like this. We'll do like a 0.5 and just like a gray. So when we hover over it, we'll see it light up a little bit. So then I'm going to look for another overlay, and I'm going to throw this on the button. Okay, so now we have an overlay inside here, and you can see it comes in tiny. So we're going to stretch to fill. And actually, before I do that, I want to give the button a little bit of padding. So I'm just gonna say like 3, and we'll just do something like that. Maybe we could do a little more. I just want a little bit of padding there in between the button. I might actually do 5. Okay, and then this overlay now, we can set that overlay to fill. And then what I'm going to do is with that overlay selected, I'm going to come down to transform. I'm going to up the scale on the X here. So if I just drag that out, it's going to just stretch it. And I might even just change this padding just to be 2. Yeah, I'm going to take the padding off of that overlay. So I'm not going to do any padding there. And then I'm just going to leave a little border going around like that. So I'm just using the scale on the X here. No padding on the overlay. And you can see what it's doing. It's just giving me a little bit of a space around this item here. And then I'm going to look for another border. And I'm going to put that border on the overlay. And you can see it just drops in a little one in the corner there. So I'm going to, what are we going to do? We're going to select that border and do stretch to fill, stretch to fill. And then again, I'm going to make this black and do an alpha of 0.5. And we don't want any padding on this. We want that to fill up that overlay. And then I'm going to look for an image. And we're going to drop that image on this overlay that we just put the border in. We can select that image, do stretch to fill, stretch to fill. So this image we want to make sure is variable is checked because we're going to have to change that. So I'm going to rename that and call that thumbnail. And then we have our quantity text, which I might just rename to say item quantity. And we have our item name. So we want to make sure that the item quantity is going to be variable. Item name we want to be variable. And our thumbnail we want to be variable. The button should come through as variable. We're going to need that too. And that should be it here. So again, if we have to come in here and change any of this, we can. If we need to adjust padding or anything like that, but this should get us going for now. So I'm going to compile and save that, and then we'll go into the graph for our slot. So in here, we're going to need to pass our item into here. So we're going to make a variable, and we're going to call this our item, and then we're going to look for our item struct that we made. And we're going to make that instance editable and exposed on spawn, so we can feed the item in when we're creating this widget. And then I'm going to use the construct here, and we're going to drag off, and we're going to do a branch. And then we're going to get this item and we're going to break it. And then we're just going to need the item and the quantity here. So I can open this up. I can hide what I don't need, and we'll just have the item and the quantity. So I'm going to drag off the quantity and I'm going to do a greater than, and we're going to just leave it 0. So I'm going to do a check to see if the quantity of the item is greater than 0. If it is, then we're going to update some of these items here. So I'm going to grab the item name. We're going to drag that out, and we're going to do a set text. And you'll see set text come up. So coming off of true, we're going to put that there. And then I'm going to grab the item thumbnail. We're going to drag off this, and we're going to set brush from texture. And then I'm going to grab item quantity, drag off, and set text. And then text should come up here. Okay, and then now I can drag off my BP base item and get the defaults. And then item name, we're going to plug into our display name here. The thumbnail is going to come from the thumbnail, so we can connect that. And then we can hide unconnected pins on this. And then we need to get our quantity over to our quantity. So I'm just going to drag this over and drag that up into the text for our quantity. So then we should have something like this. So once this gets constructed, we're going to basically populate the item name, the thumbnail, and the quantity based on our defaults and our item that we made. And then what I'm going to do is click this button. And if we scroll down here, we'll get the onClicked event. So then if we throw this down here, I'm just going to do a print string for now. So I'm going to jump back into the folder and I'm going to go into the first person input and add an input action for opening our inventory. So I'm going to call this IA_inventory, and then we're going to add the action mapping here. So I'm going to add a new mapping, pick my inventory, and I'm going to hit the tab key. So you can use whatever you want. If you want to use a key or something, just put whatever you want to be your interact for your inventory in here. I'm just going to use tab. I'm going to save it and close that. And then I'm just going to save the project too. And then I'm going to go to my player. And then we're going to add the inventory component we made. So I'm going to go to add AC inventory. So we have our inventory component added. So now I'm going to add the input action we made. So I'm going to go IA inventory, and then I'm going to come off of the started pin, and what I need to do is actually go to class settings, and I need to add the inventory interface that we made, so BPI inventory. And then as you can see now we have the open inventory and add inventory functions. I'm going to just click the open inventory, and we're going to need this too. So when the player uses the input action to open the inventory, I'm going to call this. So I can now just go into my event graph here, grab the open inventory and put it on started. So because we're going to be closing this from the widget, we need to have an interface to close it. So I'm just going to call this right here. So we don't need the one with the message. We're just calling this. And when our player presses our tab key, we're going to want that to open. So I'm going to check open there. Next time we're going to make a open inventory function. Next time we can start doing all the functions for the inventory, but we had to get the widgets out of the way here. I'm going to compile and save that, but we did get a lot done. We got all the widgets made. I think that's going to be where we're going to leave it for this time. So that's going to be it for now. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.